men emerged from the gorge one by one, their eyes hollow, their clothes in tatters. Of the 12 who had entered the Tsangpo Gorge 2 weeks earlier, only 4 returned. They spoke of a roar that never stopped, a sound so immense it seemed to vibrate in their bones. They described a waterfall, hidden in the mist, so tall and powerful that the ground shook beneath their feet. But when asked what happened to the others, they fell silent. One of the survivors, a British botanist named Kingdon-Ward, later wrote that the waterfall was not merely a natural wonder, it was a guardian, and it had claimed the lives of those who dared to approach. The year was 1924, and the search for the legendary Tsangpo waterfall had already become a death sentence for anyone who ventured too close. But the story begins long before that, with a dream that lured men into one of the most treacherous places on Earth. The Tsangpo Gorge, located in southeastern Tibet, is one of the most remote and inaccessible places on Earth. It is here that the Tsangpo River, which later becomes the Brahmaputra, carves a path through the Himalayas, dropping thousands of feet in a series of rapids and cataracts. For centuries, local Tibetans spoke of a great waterfall hidden within the gorge, a fall so immense that its spray created rainbows visible for miles. In the early 20th century, Western explorers became obsessed with finding it. The British Empire, at the height of its exploratory zeal, dispatched expeditions to map the region and claim the waterfall as a crown jewel of discovery. Among these explorers was Kingdon-Ward, a botanist and adventurer who had already survived numerous close calls in the jungles of Southeast Asia. He believed the Tsangpo waterfall could be the highest in the world, and he was willing to risk everything to prove it. In the spring of 1924, Kingdon-Ward assembled a team of 11 men, fellow British explorer Lord Cotter, a handful of surveyors, and several local porters from Sikkim and Tibet. They set out from the village of Pemako, carrying provisions for 6 weeks. The early days of the journey were filled with optimism. The weather was mild, and the trail, though narrow, was passable. They followed the river upstream, the roar of the water growing louder with each mile. Kingdon-Ward noted in his journal the beauty of the rhododendron forests and the occasional glimpse of blue sheep on the cliffs above. But as they descended deeper into the gorge, the terrain became increasingly treacherous. The path disappeared entirely, forcing them to hack through dense jungle and scramble over slippery rocks. The river churned below, a violent torrent of icy water. Yet the men pressed on, driven by the promise of the waterfall that no Westerner had ever seen. At first, the warnings were subtle. Local villagers in Pemako had refused to accompany the expedition beyond a certain point, claiming the gorge was cursed. Kingdon-Ward dismissed this as superstition. But soon, the signs became harder to ignore. The weather turned violent without warning. Sudden hailstorms that pelted the men with stones of ice, and dense fogs that reduced visibility to a few feet. The river rose dramatically, flooding their campsites. One night, a massive boulder tumbled from the cliff above, crushing a tent and narrowly missing a porter. The men began to whisper among themselves. Lord Cotter, a seasoned mountaineer, urged Kingdon-Ward to turn back. But Kingdon-Ward was adamant. They were close. He could feel it. The roar of the waterfall was now a constant presence, a low thunder that vibrated through the ground. To turn back now would be to admit defeat. And so they pressed on, ignoring the growing unease that gnawed at their minds. Despite the growing dangers, the team made steady progress. Kingdon-Ward's experience in the jungles of Burma and China proved invaluable. He knew how to read the terrain, where to place ropes, and how to keep morale high. The gorge walls rose sheer on either side, thousands of feet of black rock streaked with white quartz. The river had carved a channel so deep that sunlight reached the bottom only for a few hours each day. The men moved in a perpetual twilight, the roar of the water a constant companion. They encountered strange wildlife, a species of blue poppy that Kingdon-Ward had never seen, and giant hornets that built nests the size of a man's head. The porters, many of whom were devout Buddhists, began to perform rituals at every crossing, burning incense and chanting prayers. Kingdon-Ward allowed it, though he privately scoffed. He was a man of science, not superstition. The waterfall was a geological feature, not a deity. But the porters knew better. On the 10th day, they reached a point where the gorge narrowed to a mere 20 feet across. The river, compressed into a violent chute, exploded in a fury of white water. Beyond, they could see a mist so thick it seemed solid. The roar was deafening. Kingdon-Ward knew the waterfall was just ahead. But to proceed, they would have to traverse a cliff face that overhung the churning rapids below. The only way was to cut handholds into the rock and inch along a narrow ledge. Lord Cotter argued against it. The ledge was unstable, the rock crumbling. One slip would mean certain death. But Kingdon-Ward, driven by obsession, insisted. He tied a rope around his waist and began to move along the cliff. The porters refused to follow. Only 3 of the British team joined him. As Kingdon-Ward inched along, a section of the ledge gave way beneath his feet. He swung out over the abyss, dangling above the roaring water. The rope held, but the decision had been made. They would not turn back. Kingdon-Ward managed to pull himself back onto the ledge, but the ordeal had shaken him. Nevertheless, they continued. The next day, they finally saw it, the waterfall. It was immense, perhaps 200 feet high, a curtain of white water that plunged into a boiling cauldron. The spray rose hundreds of feet into the air, creating rainbows that danced in the mist. But as they approached, the ground began to tremble. A low rumble grew into a thunderous roar. Then, without warning, a massive rockfall cascaded from the cliff above, sending boulders the size of cars hurtling toward them. The men scattered. One porter was struck and crushed instantly. Another slipped and fell into the river, swallowed by the churning water. In the chaos, Lord Cotter was hit by a falling stone and collapsed. Kingdon-Ward, bleeding from a gash on his forehead, tried to drag him to safety, but the rocks kept falling. The survivors fled back along the ledge, leaving their dead and dying behind. The waterfall had claimed its first victims. The survivors regrouped at a safe distance, but the horror was far from over. That night, as they huddled in the rain, the gorge seemed to come alive. Strange sounds echoed off the walls, groans and whispers that the porters insisted were the spirits of the dead. Then, a mudslide swept through their camp, burying their remaining supplies. They were stranded, with little food and no shelter. The next morning, 2 porters disappeared. Kingdon-Ward found their bodies at the base of a cliff, their necks broken. They had apparently fallen while searching for firewood, but the fall was only 20 feet, not enough to kill a man. The remaining men began to suspect each other. Paranoia set in. One of the British surveyors, a man named Thompson, began to hallucinate, claiming he saw the waterfall calling to him. He wandered off into the mist and was never seen again. Kingdon-Ward realized they had to leave the gorge immediately, but the way back was blocked by the rockfall. They were trapped. After 2 weeks of starvation and terror, the remaining 4 men, Kingdon-Ward, Lord Cotter, and 2 porters, finally found a way out. They climbed a sheer cliff using ropes made from shredded clothing, pulling each other up hand over hand. When they emerged from the gorge, they were shadows of their former selves. Lord Cotter had a fractured skull and would never fully recover. The porters were so weakened that they could barely walk. Kingdon-Ward himself had lost 30 pounds and was suffering from severe dysentery. They stumbled into the village of Pemako, where the locals stared in disbelief. The expedition was over. Of the 12 men who had entered the gorge, only 4 had come out. The bodies of the others were never recovered. Kingdon-Ward later wrote a book about the expedition, but he never returned to the Tsangpo Gorge. The waterfall, he said, was not meant to be seen by human eyes. It was a place of death, and it would claim anyone who dared to approach. The Tsangpo Gorge waterfall remains one of the great mysteries of exploration. To this day, no one has definitively confirmed its existence. Satellite imagery suggests a massive drop, but the region is so remote and dangerous that no modern expedition has been able to reach it. The 1924 disaster was followed by another in 1926, when a French team vanished without a trace. In 1950, a Chinese survey party reported finding human bones near the gorge, but they were unable to retrieve them. The Tsangpo Gorge has claimed an estimated 50 lives over the past century, making it one of the deadliest places on Earth. Some say the waterfall is a myth, a legend concocted by locals to keep outsiders away. But those who have heard its roar know the truth. It is real, and it is waiting. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most doomed expeditions, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell to join us on our next journey into the unknown. What lies hidden in the world's most remote places? We'll keep searching so you don't have to.